Okay, hi everyone. Welcome. So I've never done a video like this before. Partly because of laziness, partly because of my house is not photographable usually. So, but this is life, and this is me. I had two videos that I wanted to do, and I wanted them to be just so. And you know what? I'm just going to do them both together. Okay, so the first one that I've wanted to do for a while has been with a yarn I picked up for a friend of mine. And I was going to make her some little wrist warmers. And I had so much yarn left over, I decided to make her an infinity scarf. It is this, let's see if I can get it into focus, shawl in a cake. And I picked it up at my local big box chain craft store in the community coral colors. Focus. Anyway, you get the idea. So it said that it was a medium 4 size yarn, but looking at it, I was like, it looks a lot thinner than that. So this is what it looks like. This is how much I have left. And there's a story to that. But first let me show you what the scarf and the wrist strips look like. So she has much bigger hands and forearms. She is not a dinky sized wrist person. So these are modified from Hooked by Robin. She has a puff stitch tutorial on her YouTube channel, and she also has the written pattern that you can just follow along to as well. I originally was going to make a different thing with this yarn, but I actually think that this stitch was the perfect thing to use for this yarn. I had a couple of trials and error, but this stitch seemed to work the best with this yarn for me anyway. This is the infinity scarf. So it goes from this kind of fuchsia, I showed up a little darker. It's actually quite bright. And then it goes through sort of a lighter pink, and then sort of a orange to a pale pink cream kind of color. And then I did it backwards to make it all join up together. So this is actually where I started. You can just see I did just a little bit of a seam there. I just did, what do you call that, blanket stitch? And just sewn them both together. It worked. I hated this yarn, especially by the end of this, and I'll tell you why. So the yarn itself, let's see, I don't know if this is going to show up very well. So the yarn itself is made with like a white cotton core of like 2 singles, very small singles, and then it's got this loose roving stuck over the top of it, and then it's marl wrapped with almost like this fishing line sort of material. And as you can see from here, this sample is just a random spot towards the end of where I stopped. It comes apart. The fishing line part snaps in a lot of places along the yarn, and then the roving kind of schlubs off, and you're left with this bald spot of just white cord, which doesn't look very nice and is very frustrating to work with. If you are doing a stitch that you want them to be all the same size, like every stitch ever, then this doesn't look great, and so you have to hide it inside of other stitches. You also come across, now let's see if I can find it, an example. You also come across spots where the okay, there's not one on the outside of the skein. You come across spots where the roving along the outside, the color of the yarn is just one big thick glob. Once again, the nylon, fishing line, whatever material that they've used in this. This says it is a cotton, 58% cotton, 39% acrylic, and 3% other fiber. So that cotton white is the 58%. The roving is only 39%, the actual color that you want. And then the 3% is probably the fishing line nylon that they've wrapped it with. But anyway, you'll come across like just a big clump where it's like, and what do you do with that? Like if your stitches are going across like this, all of a sudden you've got this mound to work with. So having this puff stitch, I was able to just, I don't know if you can see that, but there are some where I actually had to do less loops around to account for the big thick clumps, and then more loops around to cover those white bald spots. But anyway, the color gradient is very slow. So the idea is for the shawl in a cake is you're supposed to be able to make this shawl off of their website. I'm sorry, my daughter has stream of consciousness singing. She's 5, so if you can hear her, she's serenading you. Anyway, you're supposed to be able to create this whole shawl with this gradient effect, which is great, which is nice, lovely, ideal. So you would either start on the light end or you would start on the dark end, and you would end up with whatever. Well, the problem is they don't wrap their skeins that way. And this is where I've stopped on this one, on the dark side. But as you can tell, so it moves through all of the colors to the lightest color, and then it just stops. And that's what happens with the first skein of it, and I guarantee you there is a big, just 12-inch section on both ends where they have just completely unraveled, and they've just tied this new color on. So if you were making this shawl that they have on here, you would suddenly have not a nice, gradient from one color to the next, but you would have this immediate jump back to the beginning color. Now, maybe you just want, this gradient, and that's fine, but then what do you do with all this? Do you then switch it back around and work on this? I'm not doing that. What I ended up having to do is get a second skein from the craft store and try and find one that started with the color that I was running out of on the first skein, because I wanted the wristers to kind of look like they went together. So what I did was I started on the outside and I used the pink and the darker colors, and then I started on the inside with the darker colors there, and then worked the infinity scarf back and forth between the two outer ones in order to get the colors right. So I constantly had to switch it back and forth. Hello, dear.
Hello.
Hi, I'm doing a video.
Okay.
Okay. I love you.
I love you too.
So yeah, I had to constantly switch back and forth and make the colors work. So there are spots, if you look closely, where the colors don't quite match the same, just because the color starts and stops. So the colorways aren't as long in sections. So the pink on this end might be a little bit shorter than the pink on this end, or vice versa, in order to get all of the colors sort of transitioning one into the other. I had to kind of piecemeal it together like that. Now, is that the fault of the cake, skein, whatever? I don't know. That's just the way I did it to get the wristers to be like the kind of the same color, so maybe that's what I get for that. I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of marled like yarn. It splits too easy when you're working with it. It usually makes it really hard to see your stitches. This was that times 10. This was, if I was doing a stitch where I had to see like what loop I was going back into on a chain, or you know, something really detailed like that where you're not just working into a space, I would still be at this. Yeah. So doing the puff stitch on this was probably the best way to go because of the inconsistency of the yarn, and also just because of, you know, you can work into the space of the puff from below and just move on. So that worked, I guess. The first wristlets that I was going to do was kind of like a set that I had done for my sister for Christmas. And a couple people in my family actually, where it's like this little fantail shell stitch, and the yarn has such a slow gradient that like all the way from the forearm to the increases around the wrist were all just this pink color. Like there would have been no other color to the glove. So this is one of those projects where it's like, okay, that didn't work. Rip it all back out. Try it again. Rip it all back out. Try it a different way. Rip it all back out. Try it a different way. So anyway, but it's done now. All right. So for the infinity scarf, I basically did the same stitch as the Hooked by Robin wristlets, only I just added a chain between the puff stitches. So I did, let's see, I did a chain, let's see, I did 10 puff stitches across. So however many chain stitches that was. Let me see if I wrote it down. I did not. Whoops. But yeah, I did the foundation chain to get the length of it. I wanted it to be 10 puffs across, and I wanted it to be kind of loose. So I added, instead of a base of 2 plus 1, I think is for the wristlet pattern, I did 3 plus 1. So it would be a chain, puff, chain all across. Yeah, so it's just a little bit of more of an open, a little bit drapier of a fabric for the infinity scarf. So it is a little bit on the small side. Like I said, my friend is a normal size person, so this might be a little small on her. Hopefully not. we'll see. Once I got all the way around the color gradient, I was like, can we be done? Can we be done? Can this be done? You know, do you ever get like that with your projects where you're like, okay, let's be done? So yeah, that is that. Now, I don't know what I'm going to do with the rest of this yarn. I had originally bought myself a really pretty green one like this. I was going to make myself one. We were going to have like matching. I thought that would be fun. After working with this yarn, I decided, you know what, that's not going to be fun. I don't want to do this again. Even though now I've figured out probably the best way to go about it. And the one that I got for myself was the jade something. I returned it. But the colorway on that one was actually a good gradient. It just didn't start at the lightest color or the darkest color. It started in like the medium range, went to the dark, back to the medium, to the lighter one, and to the medium one again. So they actually did that one right. So maybe I just had terrible luck. Maybe it's just this color. I don't know. I don't know. But maybe she'll get like an ear warmer headband for Christmas next year. Okay. All right. So I was inspired by my oldest daughter. She is 8. I had gotten her some drawing supplies when we were out the other day doing errands yesterday. And I said, you know, do you have any sketchbooks? What about this one? And I grabbed a journal off of her little bookcase area. And she goes, no, I don't want to use that one yet because it's too pretty. I haven't used that one yet, and I'm not sure what I'm going to use that for, but I don't want to use that one for just practicing drawing. And I thought, wow, you are definitely my kid. I do that too. This is a little journal book that I have had for years. And I had started a few things, but I always wrote them in pencil in case that was not the purpose of this notebook, and I could erase them all without having to rip out pages and, you know, find the perfect use for this little notebook. And I decided that I was going to use it for real. I was going to make it. Okay, sorry about that. There's going to be a weird seam there. My laptop died. So anyway, so this notebook, I'm going to use it for my makes. So when I complete a project, I will write them in here. I know a lot of people do that on Ravelry. I don't really use Ravelry because I make a lot of stuff with Plarn, and I've searched perfunctorily on Ravelry, and they don't really have patterns for what I make, and I don't know if I would use a pattern anyways, because I like doing my own thing most of the time. With yarn, it's a little bit different because I don't actually use it every day, and so I like to kind of go by a guide. So sometimes I use Ravelry and sometimes I don't, but you can't really use Ravelry project stuff without having a project listed on Ravelry. So, but also, I thought it would be cool to go through and see like what I made in a year. And years from now, if I ever go, how did I do that again? Now I have a use for this really beautiful little notebook. Okay, so the other thing I wanted to show is this basket I made up. And this is made out of Plarn. I'm going to be putting up the creations kind of work video on me making this, you know, where you can watch me do it fast or whatever. Sorry that the thing is moving. My table is super wobbly because nothing in my house is level or straight, so my table wobbles. Anyway, so I used the How to Make a Perfect Circle base. And I'll put that all on the show notes for the video that I post on how I made this. So basically you're just moving the stitches around so that you don't end up with a hexagon versus a true circle. So when you're increasing, you just move the stitches around each row. She shows you how to do that. So I basically just extended her pattern out to be the amount of rows that I wanted for the base. I wanted to do 6 repeats of my pattern, and so I did the math on it. There was a base of 16 stitches on the little diagram that I drew up, which this is the first time I've really done a little diagram, so go me. I did that, so I just did 16 times 6 repeats, and I estimated how long that would be, like the circumference. And I said, yeah, that's a good size basket. So then I just needed to work out these stitches so that I'd have the right size base for it. So doing her pattern, it's a base of 6, which worked out perfect. So I did 16 rows, and you end up with 96 stitches, and that is the perfect size for doing this 6 times. So what I did is I just sectioned it off with bobby pins, because that's how I do. And then I just worked the graph. I did a repeat of 2.5 of the repeats. I was going to do 3, but I liked the height of it. I was happy with that, and I kind of like how you start on a half and you end on a half. I thought that was kind of cool. And then I added just a little border. So I did the V stitch for this, and then I just, for the border, I went back through and I did a top stitch, slip stitch. Yeah, and then just joined it up at the end. Where's the end? Right there. So I just made them look like, you know, they were supposed to. I did a continuous spiral on this one. I didn't do like where you close off the round and chain 1 and then do the next round and then chain 1 and then do the next round. I just spiraled it. So when you do that, you do end up with a little bit of a bump on the top there, but you know, whatever. I used my trusty steel boy. Yeah, is that how you said it? Boy? B-O-Y-E. Size I. I use this for everything, basically, that I can, because I have broken so many crochet hooks. But this one, solid. As for how much Plarn I used, I don't know. Made more when I needed more. So this is the second ball of white that I went through. And you can see in my creation video, I start with a giant ball of gray. And obviously you need more gray because you're doing the base all in gray. So, but then I had to stop and make more white at some point. So, you can guesstimate it. The ball was probably about this big, so 2 of those. Like, there would be an easy way to estimate the amount of yardage. You would just have to take the length of the strip, or as many strips come in a bag, and multiply it by, you know, I didn't do that. Okay, so those are the 2 projects that I finished for January. Next up, I'm going to be doing, probably later on today, I'm going to be cutting some more plastic, just to get kind of the giant kind of collection managed down. But one of the things I'm going to be doing next is finding a use for some other bags that you get when you raid the bag collection area at the grocery store. So you get the newspaper bags, you get the bags that they use for produce. I also save bags that I get from stuff like that. I love bagels, so bread and bagel bags. I do stuff like that. I'm not going to mix these all together. I'm going to probably, I'll probably cut off the top of this because they're all gathered into one seam down here. I'll probably cut off the top of that and then kind of see what that looks like, you know, how thick that is, and maybe just chain them together like that. That would be super easy. Or I could cut them in half afterwards and have just this much material. That might work too. And try it both ways and see which way I like it. But I don't mix and match different kinds of plastic together. So if I'm doing like the plastic grocery bag, everybody has a different name for them. Milk bags, carry bags, you know what I'm talking about. The bags you put your food in at the grocery store. I try really hard not to get those, but you know, it happens sometimes. We don't have a ban on them here. And we do carry cloth ones, but sometimes when, you know, you just run into the store real quick and forget them, you end up with some when you come home. But these ones always tend to pile up, so I want to see about making something with those. In the past, what I've done is cut the sides of them off, and cut the sides off here, and then cut a hole and lark head looped them together that way as a big long strip. I don't know if I'm going to do that this time. I might cut them in half this way and try that. They have a different stretch than the shopping bags. They are definitely more, they have more of a stretch, but they're also stiffer somehow. They're just a different kind of plastic and they behave differently. When I first started doing Plarn stuff, I'm completely self-taught, so I would mix and match any kind of plastic I had all together, and it didn't work. So I ended up having to, you know, rip it all back out and 100 different ways not to make a light bulb. Got to where I use like with like. Maybe I could use these two together. Maybe not. Sometimes going by the, is it the little number inside the triangle will give you a guide. You kind of just have to go by feel. So we shall see. All right. Well, that was everything. Thank you guys. I'll talk to you next time. Bye.